Do not adjust your YouTube viewership. You are tuning into the 2KU Weekly Podcast, and you are watching Icon City of Transformers fame take on the Dr. Pepper Fansville team. Figured we'd have some visuals today, just to keep some visual retention, so we don't just have the same looping GIF over the screen. But welcome to the 2KU Weekly Podcast. It is week 11, November 4th, 2024. I'm Type A Joy 101, joined as always by Danny V. And this was welcome. This was a big week. Shook things up. I'm a little nervous for what's coming up, but we're in the home stretch of this season one way or another. Danny, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, a little bit stressed out because, I have exams and stuff and definitely nothing else is tomorrow. So, yeah.
The CFP is revealed tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else of importance.
Quick public service announcement. Please vote. Anyway, regardless, let's move straight into our games this week. And we're not going to start with the game we saw on stream. First, we're going to start with a Discord exclusive game we streamed on Halloween night. I had a great Halloween, I think. Had some friends over. We had a blast. Handed out candy to kids. It was great. And we capped the night with a game exclusive to the Discord server as Washington Lee took on Chattanooga. Boy, what a game we decided to sit down for. Double overtime. How about Chattanooga surviving to stay in control of their own destiny in the SoCon? The Chattanooga Mocs are now 7-1 with a 50-42 win over Washington and Lee, who falls to 5-3. Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, that was an amazing game. It was back and forth, went to double overtime. It was just potentially one of the best games we saw on stream.
All right, next, let's move on to our stream game that week, our full-on YouTube stream game that week, as we head out to Colorado Springs and the Air Force Academy, where undefeated Air Force played undefeated San Jose State. But today we saw who the number one team in the conference was, and we saw very clearly that San Jose State had made a claim for it. 31-13 the final. An incredible day on offense for the Spartans. Just domination in all factors. Your thoughts, Danny?
Yeah, it was a great game from San Jose State in both offense and defense. They limited an Air Force game that was just scoring all over other teams. Like, Air Force seemed lost. They lost their radar in this weekend storm.
Air Force still a one-loss team and still also in the lead in the division. These two teams might play each other again in the conference championship game. Speaking of conference championships, the Big Ten's conference championship might look a little different after two games that happened last week. Ohio State rode into Camp Randall and Madison undefeated and looked like they were going to win within the final 2 minutes. But after Wisconsin scooped and scored twice in the last 2 minutes, the momentum shifted dramatically. Wisconsin pulling off probably one of the most shocking upsets of the year, 24-17 over the Ohio State Buckeyes to improve to 6-2, dropping OSU to 7-1. Meanwhile, in Happy Valley, something similar was happening. Penn State had control of the game, 21-10, entering the fourth quarter. That was until 13 unanswered would come from Iowa in the form of a touchdown and two crucial field goals, including a walk-off to send Iowa to 8-1 and drop Penn State. 23-21 the final from Happy Valley. And with all this, Michigan got a win over Illinois this week. With this, Michigan is number one, and the new number two in the conference is Iowa. After Ohio State and Penn State's losses, Ohio State and Iowa technically have a tie. Iowa, if both teams win out, Ohio State would win on tiebreakers. And if you look towards next week, Penn State, Ohio State, and Iowa and Michigan all play each other. The Big Ten might be decided in last weekend and this Danny, your thoughts on the Big Ten race?
Yeah, the Big Ten race has just intensified. Like with a crazy weekend like that, this next weekend will be a make or break week for every single team playing.
It's going to be crucial. Outside of those teams, you still have some 2-loss teams hoping to see some chaos, namely Indiana and Wisconsin. With their win and Iowa's win, Whiskey is now staying in the race. Indiana's been rattling off wins. Their schedule's a lot easier now looking forward. Their toughest games are Ohio State and Michigan State. Speaking of, the Spartans are also on the outside looking in. Meanwhile, let's look to the Big 12. A huge upset. Texas A&M, if you remember a few weeks ago, had a big upset over then undefeated Oklahoma State. Now, it's TAMU's turn to be upset as they lose at home to Kansas State, who officially is bowl eligible at 6-2. TAMU falling to 7-1, 30-27 the final from College Station. K-State in a tight race for the Big 12 North, and now the Big 12 South's 3-horse race is deadlocked. Texas A&M has the tiebreaker over Oklahoma State. TAMU plays Oklahoma this week. We also have, of course, Bedlam to end the year. That's going to be one of the best races I think the Big 12 has ever seen. Danny?
Yeah, I mean, great weekend from Kansas State, getting off that big upset win against Texas A&M does help put K-State back in the Big 12 race, but Texas A&M needs to now regroup as they're battling against a really good Oklahoma team. So let's see how they perform next week.
It's all going to come down to this last month of college football, to the pack where Arizona pulling off a big win over USC, 42-34. They're 7-2, as is USC, but Arizona with this win and a loss from UCLA are now in the lead for the Pac-12 South. If the season were to end now, Utah and Arizona would be playing each other for a conference championship. Danny?
Yeah, I mean, the battle of the teams who are located in the mountain/desert, it's gonna be a fun matchup between those two. And great job from both Utah and Arizona. Good job from Arizona from getting out the big win against the LA schools. Because, well, let's face it, a few weeks ago we were all saying about how we think they were gonna be the ones dominating.
Looking back, looking back can give you a great perspective. Meanwhile, speaking of, 2 weeks ago, no one had USF in front of the division, but now there's a real argument for it. With their 1918 win over Louisville, USF is now 7-1 and boasts a win over a top Cincinnati school. Currently, they and UCF are tied for the lead in the conference. This will lead to the war on I-4 being the decider. Keep in mind, though, UCF still has to play Cincinnati as well. Staying in the Big East, Cincinnati, after their loss to USF, laid 78 on Temple. 78-23, the final score, which I believe is the highest scoring game we've seen all season between in-conference teams. Meanwhile, the precursor to the conference or to the game of the week this week was UCF getting a 17-7 win over West Virginia. So now the Big East South, UCF, USF, Cincinnati, your top three as this season nears its climax. Danny?
I mean, yeah, the newcomers came to the Big East with a status to play, and not just that, but Louisville's right behind West Virginia. So it's gonna be a fun race between these three teams to see who will be the one to come out on top.
And this division looks to be competitive next season. You remember East Carolina and Memphis are joining the conference next year. This will likely shift teams from place to place. I don't know specifically who would move in this scenario. I would think it would be West Virginia and Pitt who would move up.
I think that's correct.
Mm-hmm. That would help the balance at least a little bit. Meanwhile, to the ACC, we'll touch on these games a little out of order from how they're put down, but Duke and Virginia Tech, VaTech with the 2019 win over Duke, getting, first of all, revenge for 2020. Getting revenge and winning the conference championship game that never was. Remember, these two teams almost faced each other in Charlotte, but Virginia Tech lost their last game to eventual champs Virginia. VaTech trying to prove that they're still in the long haul for the Big East, or for the ACC. Now 5-3 Hokies put themselves in a dead heat with the rest of the division. Oh, they're up with Duke, North Carolina as well. Georgia Tech is the current leader of the ACC Coastal in their first season of ACC membership. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, Florida State, currently one of the favorites to take home the Atlantic and the ACC as a whole, surviving a scare on the road against Boston College, 38-31 the final. FSU now 7-1, Boston College falling to 3-6. They're the reigning Big East champs up in Chestnut Hill. So now things are getting very interesting in the ACC entering this final month of play. We already talked about Coastal, but the Atlantic is currently Wake Forest's to lose. The Demon Deacons are the only undefeated team left in conference play. Correct me if I'm wrong. And they currently sit on top of the division. Meanwhile, right behind them is Florida State as well. NC State did lose this week, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Clemson was... What was that?
We lost to South Carolina.
That loss to South Carolina puts the Gamecocks in the race, as well as Clemson, of course. The two lost Tigers play Wake Forest. And Wake also has Florida State left on their schedule. Clemson has Wake and NC State still left to play, as well as South Carolina. The ACC race is not over yet, Danny.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun race to see how things will turn out, especially considering that you already got some matches like Clemson, Florida State, NC State, Wake Forest, and soon you're gonna get a couple other matchups. So it's gonna be really fun to see how it all turn out.
All right, up next, we'll wrap with two SEC rivalries, starting with the world's largest cocktail party, as Georgia upsets a 10.5 point favorite Florida in Jacksonville, 19-13. Georgia improving to 4-4 in what's definitely a disappointing year for both the Gators and the Bulldogs. Staying in the SEC though, LSU getting a 42-19 win in the Magnolia Bowl over rival Ole Miss, to improve to 3-5, trying to keep their bowl hopes alive. Danny?
Yeah, I mean, wait, which matchup?
Uh,
Sorry.
The two SECs, Georgia, Florida, Ole Miss, LSU.
The world's largest cocktail party, always a great traditional matchup in Jacksonville until next season. So it'll be fun to see how things will turn out for both these teams, but definitely a great win by them. Ole Miss, LSU, I mean, the Magnolia Bowl, classic rivalry, always something that people enjoy. Just these two teams have not been looking well this season, so any kind of boost of morale is better than nothing.
Probably would have helped them if they moved it to Halloween. That's all I'm saying. But where are they playing the Florida-Georgia game for the next few years?
Yep, for the next 2 years, according to real life, for whenever Florida's designated the home team, they're gonna be playing in Tampa. Whenever it's Georgia's designated the home team, they're playing in Athens or in Atlanta. Sorry.
Strange.
Yeah,
I was
like
thinking, it would be a very interesting spot for that sort of game. Daytona.
yeah, that would have been a perfect spot. I mean, still sort of neutral away from them, but giant stadium for them. But I guess not. I'm
It would
surprised
be
they didn't.
interesting, at least.
I'm surprised they didn't even at least go home and home.
Yeah, I figured they would just go to their campus sites. Regardless, let's now move on for a relatively big announcement. We've been talking a lot about the realignment stuff for next season. and we talk a lot about the games that happened during the season itself. We don't usually talk about what happens in between because there's not a lot that's happened in between. It's usually us planning, doing other stuff. However, we have something interesting to announce for the first time that we're going to be doing once this season wraps. We're going to be taking a week's break, and then we're going to be doing something called the 2KU Challenge. 2KU Challenge is a 12-team friendly playoff based all around the teams who all the top teams from last season. So we'll use the final top 25 for this. It is a 12-team single elimination bracket where each of the Power 6 conference champions, that's the ACC, Big East, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, and SEC, are auto-qualified as top seeds. The top 4 of those get first-round byes, while the other 2 are the top 2 have home field advantage as at-larges. Meanwhile, you have 5 at-large spots, including at least one mid-major school, which are conferences like the Mountain West Conference USA, Sun Belt, MAC, SoCon, etc. At least one is auto-qualified for this friendly tournament. Originally, there were 7 with the Mountain West, but since they're losing members, they were dropped from the power conversation, at least for now. So it's a 12-team playoff. I have a basic rendering of how it would look if it were held today. The top 4 seeds being, of course, the top conference champions: Michigan the 1, Utah the 2, Oklahoma State currently the 3. Since with Texas A&M's loss, I had to change this last minute because it was based on last week's rankings. And number 4, UCF of the Big East. Meanwhile, you have matchups as if it was the playoffs, basically. NFL playoffs. You have your 5-12, Florida State, Tennessee, your 6-11, Auburn, Ohio State, your 7-10, which is the mid-major, which is where a mid-major is. The mid-major does get to host a game. That would be San Jose State playing Penn State, and then you have the 8-9, which is Rice and Oregon currently. The first round and quarterfinals will be held on campus. The higher seed getting, of course, the home field advantage. The semifinals rotate between the 4 BCS national championship hosts: Fiesta, Sugar, Orange, Rose, in a conveyor belt fashion, like Fiesta, Sugar, then next year Sugar, Orange, then Orange, Rose, then Rose, Fiesta. The final site, the challenge final, changes hands each year, bounces from site to site. This year it'll be in Atlanta for 2025. And the schedule still to be finalized, but it'll take place starting on January 25th, the day after my 21st birthday, and going through that week till February 1st, when the 2KU Challenge will be held. Each of the games, the first round, quarterfinals, and semifinals will be Discord exclusives, with the challenge final being streamed to YouTube. Danny, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun matchup, especially considering how we're gonna have so many other big games throughout the next few weeks that are gonna heavily change up these rankings. So it'll be fun to see who will make it and who will not.
We will announce in the final 2K weekly of the season, which will be held after the Monday after the national championship. We will announce not only the final top 25, but also the 2KU Challenge participants. And that'll be how we end our final broadcast of the year. Of course, stay tuned on the Discord server for those games and plenty of other fun bonuses here and there. Every once in a while, we'll hop in call and do something interesting. Next, let's move on now to our top 25. A lot of shakeup here, particularly with that Big Ten. We're going to start, of course, with number 1, which remains unchanged as Michigan. Now at number 2 is Utah, and number 3, Oregon. The Pac-12 schools now bouncing right back to where they'd been before. Number 4 is Oklahoma State, a huge benefactor of Penn State and Ohio State's losses, and those two make up number 5 and 6, Penn State and Ohio State. Number 7 is UCF. At number 8, the ACC's Florida State. Number 9, Cincinnati of the Big East. And number 10, the ACC's Clemson, the highest-ranked 2-loss team thus far. Texas A&M, following their loss, falls to 11. Number 12 is Wisconsin, who jumped huge thanks to their win over Ohio State. Number 13 is Auburn, the highest-ranked SEC squad, followed by a fellow SEC squad in Tennessee at 14. At their highest rank in program history, now at number 15 is San Jose State. Rice is now 16th. Number 17, the Big 12's Oklahoma, has a tough matchup ahead of them against Texas A&M. Number 18 is Wake Forest of the ACC, currently controlling their own destiny in the ACC Atlantic. Number 19, falling after their second loss of the season, is USC. And number 20, the Tulane Green Wave of the SEC, on the outside looking in for the Big 12 championship thus far, or for the SEC championship. Number 21, falling from last week, is Duke. Number 22 is Kansas. Number 23, interestingly not moving that much, is Iowa. In fact, they're dropping in the rankings in spite of winning at Penn State. Number 24, still remaining ranked, is Air Force. And number 25, returning to the top 25, is BYU. The next teams up are Vanderbilt, USF, Arizona, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Columbia, Hawaii, Louisiana Tech, Virginia Tech, Florida, Kansas State, NC State, Michigan State, and UCLA. I have a couple takeaways of my own from this top 25, but Danny, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, is that the amount of change that happened within this top 25 of especially Ohio State, Penn State. Yeah, this team's dropped, and kind of surprising for Iowa to drop as well.
I do have a bit of a gripe with that. I don't understand how I don't understand how how Iowa drops a spot in spite of having one of the biggest wins in program history, and how Kansas is still ranked above them, or even how Clemson is in the top 10 ahead of a 2-loss Wisconsin whose biggest win was Ohio State, or even the 1-loss SEC team Auburn. I still don't understand how. Still don't understand.
I was to argue about USF, how they also dropped out even though they didn't lose at all.
USF did not lose; they dropped out. Arizona is also outside in spite of their win over USC, who still remains ranked even though they're behind them in conference standings. And there's of course cases you could make for some other powered teams or non-power teams, Hawaii, Louisiana Tech, Columbia, as well as a team like Kansas State, who I think could have been ranked. We'll see how things pan out. Moving from there. Anything else we want to talk about here, Danny, before we move to our predictions?
No, not really too much.
Mm-hmm. We do have some conference championship races that might get more clear as we move into our predictions for this game, or for this week. Let's move right into that. Starting in the ACC, Wake Forest and Florida State are both 7-1. You know it's a good week when that can't even make our top 20. Can't even make our game of the week. 2 1-loss teams in the top 25. Wake Forest favored by 3.5 in Tallahassee against the Seminoles. This is going to be a very pivotal matchup that's going to shape the future of the ACC. I like Wake Forest to get another big win. Their defense is one of the strongest in the country. Danny?
Yeah, it's gonna be a really fun matchup between those two. This right game right here will, I think, will basically decide who wins the Big 12 at this point. So, give me a great matchup between them.
ACC,
Yeah.
you got your
Wait,
prediction?
wait, wait, which game?
Wake NC or Wake Florida State.
Oh yeah, well that game, this game could easily help determine who's gonna win the ACC Coastal because assuming both these teams beat Clemson, well, Wake Forest beat Clemson, and whoever wins this matchup will instantly get in. And of course, a lot of chaos that can happen. So, but it's looking like whoever wins this matchup will basically be a lock in.
Do you have your prediction?
I'm gonna pick. I'm gonna pick Wake Forest to win. Wake Forest been looking impressive. They've had big wins, and I think Wake Forest gonna go into Tallahassee and win it.
All right, up next to the Big 12. That was the one you're looking for. Kansas State, fresh off their Texas A&M win, heads to Lincoln to take on a 4-4 Nebraska. K-State favored by 5.5 in the road. I like K-State to get a road win here. Danny?
Yeah, that honestly, looking at Nebraska's schedule, it's not been easy for them at least per se. Then they have to play against at this point a very, even though on and off, a good Wisconsin team, but also they played against Tennessee and a as of now a so-so Northern Illinois. But they're on a roll in Big 12 games, 4-game win streak, and I think the streak continues. Give me Nebraska to win.
That might be a death blow to K-State's K-State's conference championship ambitions. Meanwhile, Nebraska would be in the same position if they were to lose. To the SEC, Alabama trying to scrounge up any wins they can. They play rival LSU, favored by 8 in Tuscaloosa. I like the Crimson Tide in this one, Danny.
Give me the give me the Tide as well. I think they're gonna beat LSU and try and keep themselves in bowl contention at least.
They can actually play in a bowl this season too. That's big. Up next, going back to the Big 12, Texas A&M and Oklahoma, again 2 7-1 schools vying for the same division. This time not the ACC Atlantic, but the Big 12 South. Tamu coming off a loss. Oklahoma lost 2 weeks ago. OU favored by 4.5 in Norman. I like Oklahoma to move up to 8-1 and take the lead in the division in preparation for Bedlam to end the year. Danny?
I think the winner will be Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M has enough in them to win the game and win it big, and I think the Aggies will win this game.
Up next, staying in the Big 12. Moving back to the north, though, 7-2 BYU and 7-1 Kansas. The number 25 Cougars, number 22 Jayhawks. This could essentially be looked back on as a winner take all game for this division. A win for BYU would put them comfortably in the lead. I like the Cougars to win this in Lawrence. Kansas is a 2.5-point favorite, though. Danny?
Yeah, I think BYU is going to win this game. I know the game takes place in Arrowhead, but I think BYU will win this game and win this game close.
Move back to the ACC, this time to the Coastal, a tight race behind Georgia Tech. Try and keep pace with the Yellow Jackets, Virginia Tech, and North Carolina. UNC favored by 7 at home in Chapel Hill. They were favored by about that much when they played Florida State in Chapel Hill, and that blew up in their faces, unfortunately. I think UNC gets their demons out, though, and I think they beat Virginia Tech in this one. Danny?
I'm going to pick North Carolina wins one. North Carolina's been doing on and off, though. So, but I do think the Tar Heels can't beat Virginia Tech.
To the Big East, this game on Friday night, Louisville at 4-4 taking on the 5-3 Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rutgers currently in a dead heat for the Big East North. Louisville in near the back of the pack in the Big East South. The 4-4 Cardinals are 3-point favorites at home. I like Louisville to win and improve to 5-4. Danny?
I'm gonna pick Rutgers to win this game close. It's gonna be a fun matchup. I know Rutgers still trying to be in contention for the Big East North, so I think this will be a big game for them to prove that.
Coming up next, 2 games to decide the Sun Belt. Starting with App State in Middle Tennessee, a win for Appalachian State would put them ahead on tiebreakers for the Sun Belt East. Meanwhile, Middle Tennessee, a win for them would secure them in would I believe secure them in first. I don't think they've played Middle Tennessee. I don't think they've played FIU yet, who we'll get to in a moment. If Danny looks that up, Middle Tennessee favored by 2.5 at home. I actually like Appalachian State to win this one, get bowl eligible, and I think at the end of the day, they're going to give FIU a run for their money for this division. Danny?
Uh, I'm looking it up. FIU did beat Middle Tennessee already, and Arkansas State does not play against Middle Tennessee at all this season. So
Arkansas State is not in the same division, though.
yeah, but FIU already played and beat Middle Tennessee, and App State has not played against them. They play against them next week
All
at
right.
Middle Tennessee. But I think the winner of this game will be the
For App State, Middle
uh,
Tennessee.
I'm gonna pick Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee's been on a roll. Of course, they have the 2 losses against FIU and Memphis, but they have been beating their fellow Sunbelt opponents. I think they could beat App State at home.
Uh, this would be a great thing for the resume. There are the rumors about Middle Tennessee potentially getting a Conference USA invite alongside a team like Western Kentucky. We'll have to see how a win or a loss affects those dreams. Meanwhile, Arkansas State is 6-2, taking on the fellow 6-2 FIU. A win for Arkansas State, if what Danny told me before stream is correct, a win for the Red Wolves would clinch Arkansas State. It's the first team in the FBS to make a conference championship berth. Ark State is 6-2, I believe 5-0 in conference play. Meanwhile, FIU, also a 6-win team. Their race is a lot more competitive than the Sun Belt West is this season. FIU favored by 6.5 at home, but I like Arkansas State to punch their ticket to New Orleans. Danny?
Yeah, that are every other team in the Sunbelt West have 2 losses or more, except for Arkansas State, who's still 5-0 in conference. With the win against FIU, they'll become 6-0, and unless they lose to South Alabama and South Alabama goes on a winning streak, which is unlikely considering their schedule, Arkansas State basically clinched themselves the spot
So they
because they
clinch
were
with a
going to be
win and a
Louis.
South Alabama loss, correct?
Yes,
All right.
that Arkansas State, their remaining schedule includes at App State versus South Alabama, and then a non-conference game. So
That is against the
one game
Louisiana
in.
Tech team, who is one loss. So
Yeah. So basically, I think Arkansas State could clinch this one here, and I think they will, and give me Arkansas State to win.
and who does South Alabama play this week?
They play against Georgia Southern, a one-win Georgia Southern.
Arkansas State going to be Georgia Southern fans this week. And now we wrap up with the 2KU games of the week. And you heard me right when I said games. The Big Ten is such a competitive race, we needed 2 of them. We're going to be streaming them back to back, starting with Penn State and Ohio State. Both nearly undefeated entering this game, but they both lost to Iowa and Wisconsin respectively. Regardless, this will be an extremely exciting matchup. This will be the 3rd time we go to Columbus this year. We went for their matchup against Alabama and their matchup against Iowa. The Buckeyes are 3.5-point favorites at home. A win and an Iowa loss means that means that the Buckeyes are in firm control of second place in the conference. Ohio State favored by 3.5. Danny, what do you have?
I'm gonna pick. I think I'm gonna pick the. Are we talking about Iowa, Michigan, or
Penn State, Ohio State.
I just think it's gonna be Penn State's gonna win this game. It's game's taking place in Happy Valley. It's gonna be loud. It's gonna be ruckus. I think
It's
Penn
Columbus, isn't
State
it?
will. Oh, oh yeah, in Columbus. Okay. Well, I still think it's gonna be Penn State. Penn State's been a really great team this season, and of course they have that one loss against Iowa, but close loss, and I think Penn State will come out with a vengeance.
This is still very much that team that played in the national championship. Remember, Maurice Powers still quarterbacking that squad. And a lot of those members were returning. Meanwhile, it goes to show how sticking with a class can benefit you if you're the Michigan Wolverines. This was a team who went 9-4 last season, but they let their players develop. They kept them around. They didn't shuffle deck chairs. And they're now the #1 team in the country. The Big House hosting the Iowa Hawkeyes, who are 8-1 after their one loss this season being to Ohio State. They got a big win against Penn State. And if Iowa were to win, that flips the entire conference on its head. Now with every team having one loss, it would be Ohio State would be the new #1, and Iowa would be second. Then Michigan, and then Penn State. And then it would come down to if one, Iowa can win out with a win over Wisconsin and Minnesota to end the year, and two, or just a win over Wisconsin, because their last game is against non-conference Nebraska. Meanwhile, the second game would go down to, if Ohio State wins, it would go down to the game to decide who makes the conference championship between Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan favored by 9.5 against Iowa, though. I like the Wolverines to remain unbeaten and make things a lot clearer. Danny?
I think Michigan will win this game too. The game is taking place in Ann Arbor. It is gonna be loud. It's gonna be ruckus. It's gonna be big in the Big House, but I think the Michigan offense will definitely find a way to surpass the Iowa defense.
I agree. All right, well, sorry about that. That's going to do it for us here today on the 2KU Weekly Podcast. Don't forget to tune in on Saturday for the doubleheader and join the Discord for more. That's going to do it for us here. Thank you all so much for watching, and so long from the 2KU.